Hello, this is the Green Report, Rappler show on the environment and the stories of people whose decisions impact the world around us. I'm Geronimo with Gozum. And ang bilis ng panahon. Today, we are now entering into the second quarter of the year. And before we dive into Q2, we're here to discuss the biggest environmental stories that made the headlines for the last 3 months. The last time we did this was last September, right, Iya?
Ang tagal na.
Oo, and a lot has happened since then. So like in episode 8, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a couple of headlines, and then we're going to ask each other questions about everything that has happened from January to March. So let's start. Simulan natin with Iya, with the first story that made the headlines this year.
Yeah, unang buwan pa lang ng 2023 na may pumutok na issue in Sibuyan Island in Romblon. So, residents and advocates set up a human barricade, diba? Kasi they're trying to stop these mining trucks that are transporting nickel ore. So, yung company na pinoprotesta nila doon is Altai Philippines Mining Corporation or APMC or Altai, which has renewed their exploration permit just last year. But they already have the permit noong 2009 pa lang. So it's been a long, long time, no? Na ngayon lang ulit pumutok.
Actually, bakit siya pumutok? Ano yung nag-trigger? Kasi may mga trucks that went into the...
Yeah, kasi na-renew na ulit yung permit nila this year. And then they continued mining exploration activities. And then ito na nga, dahil meron ng mga mining trucks, those who are opposed formed this human barricade.
Right.
And Sibuyan actually has a long history of mining opposition na. So even in 2007, nag-climax yung protest when a local municipal councilor, Armin Marin, was shot dead during a picket. So they're not, they're very, mining and the opposition of history, it's very much embedded in the way they live. And they're very protective of their home, basically because Sibuyan Island was also known as Galapagos of Asia because of its rich biodiversity. And it's where Mount Giting-Giting National Park was located. So until now, it's still it's still an ongoing struggle. Kahit na nasuspenda ng DENR yung permit ng APMC.
Anong permit? Yung transport? Or?
Yeah, the transport. Pero yung MPSA, nandun pa rin. So this February lang yun. And then just recently, this April, Altai signed a memorandum of cooperation with civil society organizations of Sibuyan residents.
Actually, nagulat ako doon kasi nakita ko yung email sa atin about the photos of that event.
Yeah.
And then, finorward ko yun sa'yo and I was like, may ganito? Ano yun, nag-agree na ba sila? Parang okay na ba ang lahat? Is this what does it mean? So ikaw, nung nakita mo yun, what does that mean to you?
I wasn't really shocked kasi sa statements ng Altai from before, I think they always say na they're trying to work with the residents and with the community, with the organizations. Siguro yung shock lang ay parang, wow, ganun kabilis. But also,
ilang months lang.
Yeah. But also, some individuals and organizations are saying they're misrepresented by that signing of memorandum of cooperation. So it's still ongoing. Let's see kung ano pa yung mga developments na mangyayari. But still, I think what's happening there ay yung power ng mga tao. And even the local government's really, really commendable. Kasi in a lot of places in the Philippines, hindi naman din talaga ganun kalakas yung opposition sa mining.
Right.
And hindi, I think, ganun ka attached or ka committed yung mga residente sa ganong klaseng collective action, just to form a human barricade, etc., etc. So,
actually, when you look at our history of mining in the opposition in the Philippines in general, not just in Sibuyan, it's really the greenest, the most biodiverse areas na nagiging location itong mga
sadly,
mga proposed, kasi syempre yung iba may mga existing na or mga proposed mining areas. And these are the areas na ang nagtatrive talaga yung dahil biodiverse sila, talagang the community relies on the resources, the natural resources. Kaya siguro, I guess, stronger din yung opposition in those areas because they see the value of knowing what your natural resources are and allowing those resources to work for you, to sustain you and your household and your community. So I guess that's why ganun yung ka-strong yung opposition, especially here in Sibuyan Island, na pag tinignan mo nga yung photos talaga, sobrang, yun yung una kong take away doon. Ang sakit, no? Nung, di ba may mga drone shots of yung mga places na medyo
parang yung mga, kung saan nangyari man exploration activities, pag nakita, parang physically may mararamdaman ka.
Green na green siya, ang ganda talaga. And then, ayun na, kita mo na kung ano yung itsura nung mismong nasimulan na yung mining. And that's just mining exploration. So imagine if talagang magtuloy-tuloy na yung mining there. So, ang daming, kailangan talaga nating subaybayan ng mga ganitong Why do you think, what about this story really struck you?
For me, kaya ako unang na-invest dun sa story is because even last year, a friend of mine who is a mountaineer, sinare niya na itong kwento sa akin. And yung I think yung umano sa akin is because it's the home of Mount Giting-Giting. And I think also for a lot of people, kaya madali ring mag-garner ng empathy. Meron ng familiarity kasi yung Sibuyan Island. Na alam ng mga tao na nandun yung Mount Giting-Giting. One of, popularly known as one of the hardest climbs in the country.
Ah, really?
Yeah, oo. It's a point of pride for a lot of people. Pagka
Imagine mo pagdating mo sa tok-tok, makikita mo yung
Actually, sabi nila I'm not sure but in some part of the climb, makikita mo
na
yung area.
Oo.
So ayun, I think it's also that kind of familiarity that for me works also for a lot of people. Kung bakit nakakaano talaga siya ng empathy and compassion, that's why people are really online when we monitor it na they're against it.
Yeah, and that part of the story where nag-form talaga ng human chain yung mga advocates to physically block the trucks. As in, they're willing to put their lives on the line.
Yeah.
And, well, nakita natin nagkaroon talaga ng
that kind of
stand-off.
Giving a human face to the struggle.
Right.
That really...
Yun. So, as you say, hindi pa naman siya talaga tapos. Kasi,
mahaba pa siya.
So, susubaybayan pa rin natin yung pangyayari sa Sibuyan Island. The next big story, and this is really the biggest story, biggest environment story to date, it's, of course, the Oriental Mindoro oil spill. We covered this physically in Oriental Mindoro. Nagpadala tayo ng team doon, and we still cover it up to now. Pero admittedly, syempre, talagang because ang tagal na rin like magto 2 months na. Magto 2 months na since the environmental disaster. Let's call it what it is. It's an environmental disaster. And as we earlier reported this week, the oil is still leaking.
Yeah.
So imagine mo 2 months in and they still have not found parang may mga certain tanks na ubos na. Tapos yung mga tanks na hindi pa rin na sisil or hindi pa siya nasa stop yung leaking. And actually, an environmental official said that with the industrial oil still leaking, they cannot finalize a rehabilitation plan of the affected areas kasi they have to contend with the gas or the oil leak rather. And then, Environment Secretary Antonio Yulo Loizaga hopes the leak can be controlled within this month. Itong this month na to, ilang months ko na narinig.
Like this April.
Parang ito rin yung narinig ko ng March, ito rin yung narinig ko ng April.
And then, hindi maririnig natin this May.
Next month, para na makontrol na sana next month. Which is how many days na lang? 21 na. So, di ba? Mag 2 months na.
Isang linggo na lang.
But what has happened also is that more areas are now affected by the oil spill. Based on the latest bulletin of the DENR, there are already 4 cities and municipalities affected in Batangas, 2 in Occidental Mindoro, 12 in Oriental Mindoro, 2 in Palawan, and 1 in Antique. Tapos, in April 19, the latest na nangyari is that ang alam ko, dapat may pupuntahang event si Secretary Loizaga, but she attended instead as this harmonization activity at DENR. So these are the several government agencies meeting together para mag-participate in an oil spill. Ito yung talaga nakalagay ito dun sa progress report nila or bulletin nila, latest bulletin nila, na it's an oil spill recovery planning harmonization activity at the DENR. So, yun, that is the latest on the Oriental Mindoro oil spill, which ito talaga sure ako really won't happen or won't end anytime soon talaga. Knowing
years pa actually.
Sana hindi years. Imagine mo, Iya, ilang taon mo itong i-cover, ilang taon natin itong i-cover if years siyang umabot. Pero, yun nga, parang 2 months in, what have we seen or ano yung nakita natin so far? Meron, nung mga first few weeks, may frustration sa local officials.
Yeah.
Pero ngayon, yung parang nangyayari na is, parang naghahanap na tayo ngayon ng way to harmonize all the, kasi nga, iba-iba nga yung response ng mga government agencies. Kasi syempre, kung DSWD ka, unahin mo yung aid.
Yeah.
Kung DENR ka, unahin mo yung effect on.
Kung anong mandato mo.
Yeah. Pero, actually, di ba, hindi naman na to bago na multiple government agencies responding
it's not the first time.
to a disaster. Di ba, even in a disaster situation like, let's say, typhoon, agencies usually come together to respond to a disaster like this. And, in a normal, in an ideal world, sa simula pa lang, harmonize na dapat. Yeah. Or maybe we were caught off guard. Maybe this is something na hindi naman in-expect ng mga government agencies that an oil spill of this magnitude will happen. It's already a tier 3 oil spill response. So that's already at the highest level of response.
Yeah.
Which actually may mga na naman na talaga, may mga international teams na talaga or countries helping. Yeah. So it's already a major happening, a major environmental issue na kailangan na talaga nating tutukan here at Rappler, especially yung long-term impacts nitong disaster na to. Actually, Iya, you've been working on a story. Currently working on the story. The story is about the long-term impact of the oil spill on the environment. Kasi yun naman yung focus natin bilang environment cluster tayo. What do you know so far? Ano yung nakita mo na?
Actually, I already talked to 2 experts. One marine geochemist from UP Marine Science Institute and another marine biologist from Mindanao State University who happened to have 16 years of experience in oil spill research. So, I was actually surprised because their tone is positive and hopeful that the worst part is already over. Yeah. But just to jump on what you said earlier, that maybe the government was caught off guard. This is the frustration of the experts I talked to. Kasi they keep saying the Philippines is an archipelagic country.
Right.
And, hindi bago yung nagtatransport tayo ng oil. Kasama yun sa,
it's been happening along that.
Yeah. It's ubiquitous, diba?
Yeah.
So, we need to have, that's what they're basically saying. We need to have a proper oil spill response. It needs to be systematic.
Right.
Because Dr. Irene Rodriguez, the expert from UPMSI, she said that the first 48 hours of an oil spill is really, really crucial, and it will dictate the oil spill response. Because kapag nag-spill na yung oil sa dagat, sobrang dami nang nangyayari dyan. Because the ocean and the oil itself has processes, diba? It will evaporate, it will disperse, depending on the type of oil, if it's heavy, if it's light, gaano kabilis yan kakalat, etc., etc. So, it needs to have that sense of
Parang dapat,
urgency.
right, dapat meron ka ng rule book on what happens.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, we're not hoping that it happens often enough for it to have a...
Yeah,
pero
but we need
the
to have
reality
one.
is, it happens.
Yeah.
Di ba meron na nga tayong tier system on the oil spill response. So, ano naman, magkaroon ka rin nga ng go-to na, which agencies do you activate once this happens? Ano yung dapat mangyari in the first, yun nga, you said 48 hours. Sinong dapat rumisponde? Well, we know PCG was the first, among the first to respond, di ba? Pero, yun, maybe, naisip ko lang to while we were preparing for this episode, pero I realized this is actually the biggest issue na kinakaharap ni Environment Secretary Loizaga since she started.
She's not even a year.
Yeah, less than a year into office, and ito na yung ganitong klaseng disaster na yung kinaharap niya.
That's why some green groups are frustrated because she's a silent worker, I think. Hindi siya masyadong maboka rin sa media. And I think some green organizations are expecting na this disaster, yung ganitong kalaking disaster,
Right.
They would see, di ba? Magkakaroon ng visibility si DNR Secretary. But so far, I think, wala pa.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
Ano pa yung mga susunod na gagawin niya. But what groups have been doing though, kasi nga, di ba, naapektuhan na, as I mentioned earlier, may 4 ng areas in Batangas affected. So, it's already affecting the Verde Island Passage. And what groups have been calling, they're calling on the president for him to declare the Verde Island Passage as a no-go zone for oil tankers para hindi na to mangyari. And the hope naman is, even if these things happen, I mean, na kahit may mga tankers na kailangang dumaan, hindi sa ganitong ka-sensitive na area, like the Verde Island Passage. We have multiple articles and interviews about how important the Verde Island Passage is. We've written extensively about it, and yun yung mga panawagan ng mga grupo na to na
some things that can change, I think, in the future.
And more protection for areas like this. Kasi ano nga ba ang protection for this area now that this has happened, di ba? So, yun yung marami pang issues, mga sangay-sangay ng issues sa isang tragedy na nangyari because of rough water.
After ng clean-up, ang dami pa eh. Hindi natatapos sa clean-up.
And again, syempre ang tinitingnan natin bilang tayo ay nasa environment clusters because is the environment impact, but kailangan mo rin tingnan
the social cost.
Tingnan mo, kailangan din tingnan yung epekto nun sa communities, sa tourism, sa livelihood, even just pangkabuhayan ng mga taong to, yung pang-araw-araw na survival nila. A lot can be discussed and a lot can be said about this issue actually. Kaya,
lots of layers.
So, if we go on and on, baka maging tungkol to sa Oriental Mindoro oil spill. So, we will go now to the third headline of this quarter. This is an international headline. The United Nations voted this in March to ask the World Court to rule on national climate obligations. So, ano ba yung story na to? Actually, this is a historic event in that yung United Nations General Assembly, they passed a resolution to seek an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice para to define kung ano ba yung mga obligations ng mga states para i-combat yung climate change. Of course, we know na, di ba, every year we cover this, Rappler covers this, meron ng laging COP, the Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It's a very mouthful, long acronym, UNFCCC. Pero the Conference of Parties, or COP, we cover that every year. And doon nagpe-pledge yung mga countries kung ano yung mga gusto nilang gawin, ano yung obligations sila for climate change. Pero actually earlier this month, kinausap ko si Lian, nagkaroon lang kami ng Lian Buwan, our justice reporter, who is now on sabbatical. Tinanong niya ako about climate change kasi in one of her classes. And then tinanong niya ako kung ano nga ba, paano, how do you hold countries liable or accountable for the pledges that they give, and if they don't achieve or if they don't fulfill those obligations. Tapos parang napatigil din ako, parang, oo nga, no? Parang,
Meron ba?
countries can keep pledging and countries can say, okay, gagawin namin to by 2030. Pero, ano nga bang mangyayari if countries don't? Diba?
That's a problem.
That's the question na ako din parang, oo nga, no? Parang hindi ko rin alam kung ano yung sasagot dyan. Ikaw, kung tinanong kita about that, what do you think can we do kung countries don't fulfill their climate obligations? Or, in short, what happens if countries don't fulfill their climate obligations?
I think legally speaking, wala naman talagang
Kasi, although
mechanisms in place, I think.
ratified naman natin yung NFCC. So, we're a party to that convention. And also, we have our own Climate Change Act. So, meron tayong, hindi naman tayo tipong lost. And also, we pledged, yun nga, our nationally, NDCs, our
NDC,
our nationally determined contributions there. Our nationally determined contributions, we have a national determined contribution na we committed in 2020, last 2 years ago, we committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030, which is just 7 years from now. And although we are not a big emitter talaga of greenhouse gases, meron tayong ganong klaseng obligation. Yun. So parang, yun yung mga, I guess, mga mechanisms na meron tayo. Pero it still does not, wala pa rin, okay, paano pag hindi ginawa ng Pilipinas?
Sure, right?
How will all the other countries, hold the Philippines accountable if hindi natin magawa yung 75%? Yung 75% comes with conditions, by the way. So, hindi lang siya as simple na parang dapat unconditional na 75%. Pero, meron pa rin tayong commitment. What happens if we don't do that commitment?
I think, di ba, I think that's the crux of the problem. Yung following through after the commitment.
Right.
Kasi, aside sa ang hirap kunin yung commitments ng iba't ibang bansa and to agree on the limits on emission, yung follow through nun on holding these countries and even corporations accountable, doon na rin nagkakatalo-talo eh.
Yeah. Ito merong sinulat si John Leo Algo, one of our columnists who we also interviewed in this show. Meron siyang sinabi na it should be noted that adaptation is the nation's primary mode of climate action. So what we do, meron kasing adaptation, may mitigation, di ba? And then sabi niya, the nation's primary mode of climate action is actually adaptation. And given its high climate vulnerability and low contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions. As a result, some of the proposed NDC policies and measures are focused on adaptation, sabi niya. And then he continues, perhaps the most vital to attaining the 75% target is successfully transforming the Philippines' energy sector from fossil fuel reliant to renewable energy dependent. So that's where the energy transition discussion enters in to this whole thing. Na parang ito yung pwede nating gawin. Ngayon, although nag-suggest na siya, marami na siyang suggestions on what we can do, what the government must do. Ang suggestion niya doon sa column niya is dapat the government must present a decarbonization plan. Na parang dapat meron tayong roadmap. Kung 2030 yung ating timeline or ating deadline, what happens between now to 2030 para i-limit natin yung greenhouse gas emissions natin? When you think about it, that's just 7 years from now.
So do you think 2030 is achievable?
Girl,
given the rate we're going,
looking at what the discussions are happening in our energy transition, then they're considering not so clean energy, not so
transition
energy
daw.
Clean energy transition energy. Considering na may mga ganong discussions pa rin at this point in time, when renewable energy technology has become cheaper, parang I'm honestly I'm sure that's a good thing to hope for, but
Realistically.
feeling ko hindi siya mangyayari. And I think most countries will really fail with their inano ko na talaga eh, no? Nag-decide na ako. Fearless, super fearless forecast. Pero I think when you look at this kaya this itong balita na to about the UN seeking the World Court's opinion, what makes this very important yung mangyayari is that dahil may ganito ng mechanism, you can ask now yung international, wait, let me search for it, International Court of Justice for its opinion on how the nations or how the states that committed to their climate obligations, how they can be made liable. So it could take it sends, sabi dito sa article that we published, it sends a loud and clear message not only around the world but far into the future that on this very day, the people of the UN acting through their governments decided to leave aside differences and work together. So, actually, maraming countries to na nag-sign ng resolution. Pero, we should note that the US, I think, did not support the resolution at the General Assembly. The US is one of the biggest, top 3 yan. Top 3 sila ni China and ni India. Yeah, they're the biggest polluters or greenhouse gas emitters. So, yon. Sabi dito, the resulting advisory opinion could be a vital input to the burgeoning climate-driven lawsuits around the world. Again, this is not law, as most of this international tools or mechanisms are. They're not binding, but we can hope for the best. Hindi siya.
They're not binding.
They're not binding. Pero what could happen is that they could influence future negotiations.
Hopefully.
Puro hope na lang tayo dito sa podcast na ito.
Basta wag lang mawalan.
Yeah. So, but things are hopeful, at least here at home. Of course, last year, we talked about the Commission on Human Rights report that, yung landmark report, that's historical siya. It's a world's first. And we were one of the first to declare that climate change is a human rights issue. That's one. And then last March, yes. Last month, an SWS survey released, sabi niya, 93% of Filipino adults personally experienced the impacts of climate change in the past 3 years.
That's huge.
That's a huge number of Filipinos believing that climate change is real and it's impacting their lives. So, it's just a matter of...
Maybe something good is coming out of reporting a lot of negative climate change reports.
Yes. Well, kasi, I think climate change reporting especially is mas talagang, the urgency kasi pushes you to really report on so-called negative, quote-unquote negative things. But, a lot of good things are coming out of stories like that din naman. Pero, at least we know now that most Filipinos, or at least sabi ng survey na to,
that's a good sign.
A lot of Filipinos believe in climate change and that it is impacting their lives. That is the third of our...
hopefully.
Yes, the third of our headlines on the first quarter of 2023. Okay, so we're now going into the fourth and last headline for the first quarter of 2023. Iya, sa'yo ito?
So, yun nga, habang kano-cover natin yung Sibuyan mining, noong February. This February din, pumutok yung balita na when Masungi reported, Bureau of Corrections visited their site to conduct an inspection for reported relocation of their offices. So, ang claim ng Bucor ay dahil nga meron silang titulo of more than 270 hectares. So, basically, they own the land. As of September...
As in, may sila na they own the land.
As of last year, September 28, 2022. So, personally, dahil kinover ko na to at nakapunta na rin ako, nung una ko narinig yung balita, parang hindi siya practical.
Oo. And
so, where are you?
Hindi mo lang kinover mo. You wrote stories about this. You did a documentary about this. And I'm sure...
All day there.
Yeah, I'm sure breaking story talaga to for you na, biglang merong planong ganito yung Bureau of Corrections.
And the site is practically unbuildable. Kasi limestone karst formations yan eh. Parang where are you going to put the offices there? Yun yung yun yung tanong, 'di ba? That's why I think also pumutok yung balita and a lot of people are reacting on it. Lalo na siguro din yung mga nakapunta na doon. And then on Monday, February 20, Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla said na hindi pa final yung decision na yun. And then by March 7, less than a month after ng inspection, sabi nila hindi na ipupush through yung plan. But actually, one of our bosses was asking me kung yun na ba yun? Kung yun na ba yung huling, sabi ko, parang sa nangyayari po sa Masungi lately, hindi pa yun yung finale, no? And they're still facing a lot of issues from different fronts of the government. And since dahil nasa Bucor yung titulo, that's going to be a huge, I think that's going to be a huge problem for the management.
Right. I mean, Senator Nancy Binay visited Masungi this week, diba? We reported on that. And then one of the questions was actually about that. And ang sagot nga niya is, okay, Katapang as Bucor chief right now might not push through with this plan. But what after 6 years, after his term, kung kailan man, hanggang kailan man yung term niya, after his term, what happens next? Parang, as long as that land is owned by Bucor, they can always have that, they can always do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, if you have a leadership that has the political will to relegate their offices there, kahit na ano man yung maging protesta ng management and other people who support the conservation site, it can happen because legally, sa kanila yung lupa. But also, yun nga yung problem kasi Masungi, yung claim na Masungi dun sa area na yun, lagi silang parang they're hanging in the balance. Kasi even with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, yung MOA nila with them, na sinay ni Gina Lopez, DNR now is looking at the revocation of that contract. So it's really, they're really in a tight spot. Kasi even with the government, they're having a lot of problems. Lalo na with, eto lang, this recent report ng sa Bucor.
You're right. And both houses of, the House of Representatives and the Senate,
are conducting
hearings into this, di ba?
Yeah.
So there's that Bucor issue, but there's also the DNR side where
they're being probed.
Yes, that they're reviewing this agreement with Masungi. Anong masasabi mo about what Senator Nancy Binay said na the right agency should own the land? So, government agency pa rin. But I think she doesn't, ang impression ko is she doesn't think Bucor should own the land. Parang, pero government agency pa rin. Parang, what can you say about that?
Well, supposedly it should be the DNR who is
hands-on about it.
Hands-on. And kasi protected area siya eh. I've been asking some people, yung mga comments nila, bakit may title ang Bucor when it's protected area, diba? And ayun, dapat I think supposedly DNR should be at the forefront of dapat hindi yan ginagalaw, etc. Right. The conservation must take priority over, kasi it's still a government priority, diba? I mean, Katapang was saying he is pro-environment, but he has a duty to Bucor. But I think conservation work should take priority in all government duties.
Right. And so far, that's what's happening. There are studies saying that yung conservation that's happening in Masungi is actually helping the biodiversity of the area, right?
Yeah.
Oo.
Yeah, that endemic species are going back there, diba? That they reforested the area. Yung sinabi na actually na ano nga kasi yung sinasabi ni Katapang, he is pro-environment, but lagi may ganun, lagi may caveat. It's something na House lawmakers, ganun din yung tono nila. Na, okay naman yung ginagawa ng Masungi sa conservation work nila, pero, etc., etc., etc.
Although, don't you agree na dapat naman talaga, I mean, if you're going to conserve, by the book naman din dapat talaga siya. Like, it should still follow those, if we have environmental laws, those laws are there to protect people
Yeah.
like the Masungi Foundation who wants to do conservation work there.
Yeah, I think meron naman talaga mga batas din na sinusunod. But I'm just I think I'm wary of that kind of language.
Okay.
Na parang okay naman, but
Pero,
yeah. That kind of language would reflect how you would prioritize conservation and protection work. Or the level of
what comes first or
appreciation.
what
comes
is
first,
prioritized?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yan. Isa pa yan. Actually, lahat ng mga discuss nating headlines parang hindi pa sila tapos.
Yeah.
we would love to discuss about stories that are already done, but as most of these environmental stories are,
always developing.
they're always developing, they're always still happening, and that's why we're always here to monitor these stories. We will be back for I don't know until when. Our last episode like this was September, and hindi ko alam kung marami ulit mangyayari in the next months. But tune in to Rappler for those stories. You can go to rappler.com/environment. Tama ba? Tama.
Tama.
For those stories, for more stories on the environment, you can go to that link. If you have questions and suggestions for future episodes, you can reach Iya on Twitter at Iya
Gozum.
Iya Gozum, right?
No blue check anymore.
No blue check, right? Oo, ako din. Wala na rin akong blue check. And it's Geronimo at Geronimo for me on Twitter and Instagram. Join us again for our next episode. Bye!
Bye!